In perhaps the most strongly worded letter of its kind, more than 100 former bureaucrats, security officials, intelligence officers, police officers have written to the Prime Minister. They are describing what they call a frenzy of hate and asking the Prime Minister why he is silent. The letter also makes the argument that the communal clashes and conflagrations that we have seen in recent weeks are different from what this country has witnessed before, because these government servants or former government servants argue that there is a clear plan to establish what they call a Hindu Rashtra. The letter goes on to say that it isn't just the Muslims and other religious minorities of India that are at the receiving end, but the constitution itself is a target. Will this make any difference to how the government responds? In fact, BJP leaders and their supporters are calling this an example of fear mongering. Let's introduce our panel on the program today. Julio Ribeiro, one of the country's most respected senior, now retired police officers, is with us. He's one of the signatories to that letter. Welcome to the program, sir. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Sandip Ghose, commentator, columnist, a supporter of the Prime Minister, and he distinguishes that from being a supporter of the BJP, is with us as well. We're also joined by the editor of the Milli Gazette, Zafarul-Islam Khan. Thank you for joining us, Khan Saab. And also joining us is Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, who retired as the former special director with the Intelligence Bureau. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let me start with you, Mr. Ribeiro. This, and I've seen many such letters in the course of my life as a journalist, when those who have retired from government often make policy interventions, but this is a very, very strongly worded letter. It calls the Prime Minister's silence on the recent clashes that have taken place in different parts of India deafening. Mr. Ribeiro, what made you sign this letter and endorse these words? Because the BJP might well make the argument that the Prime Minister is the head of the country and he should not be speaking on localized religious clashes in scattered places of North India. So, what made you feel so strongly as you have in this letter?
I think that there should be many more voices raised against what is happening today, because it's very frightening, and we cannot live in a country where such in an atmosphere where such hate is being spread, and such plans are afoot where organized hate and violence is being unleashed with the obvious knowledge of the authorities, because 7 or 8 states the same pattern was seen, and that same pattern would not have happened, would not have been noticed unless there was a central direction. And it was quite obvious to a practiced eye who has worked in the police for years, and even our intelligence agencies, that there has been some sort of central direction. Now, if there is, and I'm quite sure there is, there's going to be a lot of problems in this country. And of course, the idea of India that this regime has is quite different from the idea that the previous regimes had. And we had worked under the previous regime. So I suppose there would be some difference, but not to this extent, where the governments itself are responsible for fomenting communal trouble. I worked for years in the police and have dealt with this type of problem for a very long time. And I've never seen a case where the government in power would foment trouble like this, because for the simple reason that they are responsible for maintaining law and order. And if any disturbance to the law and order reflects on them, and they are supposed to answer it in parliament and in the assemblies. And
Yes.
there's a lot of noise and hullabaloo when such things happen.
Let me, sir, put to you what some of the counter arguments that have come from supporters of the BJP may be to what you've said. You have been a decorated, gallant police officer who has served, sort of, with, inspired so many of us with your service. The role of the police has come under scrutiny, and I want you to talk about that before you talk about the role of politics. Two things have happened in Khargone, in Madhya Pradesh, and in Delhi. We've actually seen police officers themselves injured. Right, we have in fact seen bullet injuries to a superintendent of police in Madhya Pradesh, and we have seen a police officer in the capital as well being injured. The police might argue that this demonstrates that the pushback is more severe, that you are being simple minded. What would you say about the fact that the police too has suffered in these clashes?
They have suffered is obviously is going to happen, because when you unleash violence of this type, you're bound to have a reaction. And in this particular case, I have a feeling, at least in Delhi, from what I've seen on the television, that this knowledge was given to the opponents, to the Muslim minority, that there is going to be trouble around that area. I mean, they would not have normally expected, because I have not heard, at least in my whole career, of processions being taken out on the occasion of Ram Navami or Hanuman Jayanti. So they may not have known about it unless they were more or less given an indication. Because if they are given an indication that they will gather to protect themselves, and that is probably what happened. From what I've seen on the television, it looks to me that they were they were made to react, and they wanted that reaction so that they could finally put the blame on them. And this is a common tactic, or which we see nowadays. And so, I
But if you
personally,
see the images, just one last question to you and then I'll open it up. If you see the images from Delhi, for example, in Jahangir Puri, both the groups, the Shobha Yatra that is taken out without police permission, again raising questions as to why that happened, and the Muslim groups that you're now seeing in these pictures, and can we also play the Shobha Yatra, they're armed. You can see swords in the hands of the Muslim groups. You can see rods and sticks and bricks, in the hands of the in the Hindu groups. You see both of these groups armed. So how do you take a look at that? How do you respond to that?
you know, I've seen in my experience of so many years, and I've gone through many communal riots, that usually the Muslims are on the defensive. After all, they are a minority, and numbers do count, and they are overpowered finally. And that is going to be the final result of all this. But uh, they will protest, they will protect themselves, they'll protect their women folk, they'll protect their um, property, etc. Finally, they will lose. There's no doubt, because numbers are so daunting. But defense is always organized. That I have seen in my experience, and you have to expect that, because nobody is going to lie down and say, "All right, kill me." That's only the martyrs who do that.
Okay.
But it's,
You're actually suggesting that religious minorities are being pushed to defend their communities, that they're being pushed into a sort of provocation, at the end of which the narrative then becomes a kind of "I told you so" moment from the far Hindu right. Let's open this up. Sandeep Ghosh, before I get in Mr. Azad and Zafarullah Khan, let me bring you in. We've seen the BJP responding to this letter as an illustration of fear mongering. What would you call it? It's a very, very strong letter. The BJP says it's an attempt to spread misinformation.
Barkha, first of all, I think it's nobody's case that if something illegal has been done by any side, and even the police or the authorities to do on, without notice, any unauthorized, demolition of encroachments, etc., that's nobody is supporting. Nobody can support. So that's the first point I would make. Secondly, regarding the letter, all citizens of the country, right-thinking citizens, are entitled to raise their concern if they're genuinely concerned. And then Mr. Ribeiro said it should not be confined to some 100 people. If the issue is so large, many more people should be raising this issue. Where I have a problem is people, former civil servants, using their calling card to raise an issue for getting mileage, traction, and heft. If indeed they want to use their calling card, they have to maintain a semblance of objectivity, of balance, and religious neutrality. With due respects, whatever Mr. Ribeiro said just now, it is full of assumptions. Assumptions like if it has happened across 9 states, there must have been some central direction. If it has been something has happened, the Muslims always suffer. What is the proof? Where are the evidence? You don't take evidence from TV channels. There are CCTVs across the country, in the capital and everywhere. So let's talk of evidence. Let's talk of facts, rather than get into into a tangent and start accusing of Hindu Rashtra agenda, etc. When you say that, take it to such extreme, people are even accused, if you read the letter, of the administration and their former earlier colleagues being communalized. So today we are saying, the same people are saying their own colleagues who have been in the system today are communalized. That's a very, very grave accusation to make. And if people are making these accusations,
can I ask you something? No, I'm asking you
these
only.
are being made. I will get there. I don't want to hog time. So if these acquisitions are made in this manner, I would say go further than fear mongering. I'll say a different campaign of hate is playing. That's the hate against the present regime, Mr. Modi. That with the hate, that's why these letters come up. People write op-eds on church attacks, which did not happen.
Okay, hang on. Let me ask you something. You said at the beginning that these are, former bureaucrats looking for heft and kind of publicity
to get heft. If they wrote as ordinary citizens, if they wrote even under the name association, I have no issues. Why do you have to, and why do everybody have to play back that they are so many former bureaucrats, ex-police officers, ex-raw officers? That does not put them give them any special rights.
But Sandip, let me interrupt you. Hang on. Let me ask a question here.
You say 100 citizens of the country have written, and more should write.
Because the fact that all of these citizens have served in different departments that are relevant to the conversation, policing, RANW. Let me ask a question. Let me ask my question now. Sandip, I've heard you.
A blemishless record, all of them. Okay.
Sandip,
let me ask my question. Specifics of people who have.
Let me ask my question. Let me ask my question. You can respond to the question. Two things. One, you said that these are people, who are using their calling card for heft. My submission to you would be that some of them have been veteran police officers, some of them have been national security advisors, former foreign secretaries, former RANW officers, former diplomats, former police commissioners, gives them a perspective from inside government about governance. So it isn't, somebody who has had no exposure in government, somebody who has not, sort of been at the helm of these situations. So why would you discount that experience? They're entitled to speak. They're entitled to use their decades of professional experience and respond to a situation.
You are banding that about. But if they are, that's why I said there's a semblance of objectivity, balance, and a religious neutrality. If people are talking today of attack against Muslims, why are these people not talking about any other attacks? Why are they underscoring it is happening only in BJP ruled states and not talking about what's happening in non-BJP ruled states? There are home secretaries and chief secretaries who have presided over states where there is rampant violence, political. Do they raise the voice there? They don't. They will not even mention that. Does Mr. Najeeb Jung answer that? How did these illegal constructions come up during his regime? Or if we are saying that these IS officers are so good, a Turkman Gate would not have happened in the country. Or we are talking about raw officers. There are a lot of allegations about raw officers, how they have been,
here are the facts.
Jammu and Kashmir, even against minorities.
Facts. I don't speak for. Okay, Sandip, calm down. I don't speak for any bureaucrat personally, but here are the facts. You have an editor of a so-called a channel who thinks that the Indian military tweeting about an iftar party is what he calls poison. This is a man who has been photographed with some of the top politicians of the country. You know that I'm
Condemn him by
talking
all
about
means.
Sudarshan
Condemn
TV,
him by all
right?
means. Barkha,
There is
condemn him by all means.
okay. He attended a so-called sort of Dharam Sansad. Sandip, you're not letting me speak. Please let me speak. You can respond after that, right? His staffers are able to walk into Haldiram's outlet and bully with their cameras the staff into explaining why there is Urdu/Arabic written on the packets of namkeen. This is a man whom the Supreme Court is accused of vilifying Muslims. Now, are we going to call the Supreme Court biased? I could give
No,
you many such. 1 minute. I'm still asking my question. Let me put your points to Mr. Ribeiro that there is a
just one
selectiveness.
minute, Barkha.
1 minute, Sandip.
We have
I'll come
discussed
to
this
you.
particular case in your channel, and
Yes.
all of us condemned it. I was the first one to condemn it.
There's also
I'm not for a moment supporting them.
okay. There's also the Home Minister of Madhya Pradesh who spoke about using bulldozers as an instrument of justice. There are many things to unpack here, and you've made a lot of strong points. Let me take your point to Mr. Ribeiro, and then, sorry, Mr. Azad, I'll come to you right after that, and to Zafar Saab. Mr. Ribeiro, the allegation, of course, by those who are advocates or supporters or voters of the government, and in Sandeep's case, an admirer of the Prime Minister, is that your outrage and the outrage of your former sort of your fellow signatories is selective. It is basically rooted in your inherent dislike for Mr. Modi. How would you respond to that, Mr. Ribeiro?
I am not no inherent dislike for Mr. Modi. There's no question about any inherent dislike. I mean, I can tell you that if he does some good work, and which I appreciate, I'm prepared to appreciate it. And I have done it in the past, and I can show you many instances of that. So there's no question of just, but if there's something done which is going to destroy the very fabric of this country, well, I think that I should be allowed to speak up like anyone else.
Yes.
I'm very worried about it. I mean, after all, this is our country. Our ancestors also are born here, and they've come along with Mr. Modi's ancestors. There's no question of anybody trying to uh, just belittle him. There are times when I've seen some criticism of some of the things that have happened. For example, during the COVID, which I don't agree with. And when I don't agree, I say so. I mean, I don't agree that Mr. Modi failed as far as COVID is concerned. I think he did a great job, if you ask me. In the beginning, everybody was puzzled. I mean, all countries were puzzled. It's something that had never happened before. So when he does something good, I'm prepared to say so.
Okay, let's bring in the others now. Mr. Azad, you have, how do you see this? There's one perspective that Mr. Ribeiro brings, a completely different perspective that Sandip Ghosh brings. What about you?
Well, Barkha, let me say at the very outset that Mr. Ribeiro represents the conscience of the nation. I mean, here is a man I met in the middle 90s when I was an escort officer when he came to Bhopal. And his views were exactly the same on a number of issues. And I must also say that in his writings, he has praised the government whenever the government has done the right thing. Now, I am no supporter of BJP, but I laud the sentiment of Mr. Ribeiro and his likes who have called about, ending the social strife, the problem happening in these various states. But I have a problem. The problem I have is, if you see across these 9 states, the police uniformly failed. Now, if there was a central direction given to all the 9 states, why would the police fail in other areas? And let me tell you, the failure of the police in Rajasthan was perhaps much more serious than anywhere else. The motorcycle procession was attacked viciously. In Jharkhand, it was attacked again. And if you see the history of these processions being attacked, it's been there in the earlier era also. Where is the difference? The procession goes, There are loud chantings. There is loud music. The attack comes from the mosque. So what is the police doing? If the police and the administration were so caring, why didn't they take action against the procession?
Okay, hang on. I have to interject with a couple of things that I kind of want to point out in what you said. I'm not stopping you. Acha, okay, go ahead.
One line.
Yeah.
So if the BJP government is taking care of the Hindus, after all, is a vote bank politics on both sides, nothing different. Then the other governments are appeasing the other side and Hindus also a little. What is the point of taking action after the riot has taken place?
Can I ask my question now?
Yes.
Can I ask my question? Yeah. Two things. One, you made a comment saying that the attack comes from the mosques. That's what you said. If we look at what happened in Delhi, we also do know that the procession that was taken out by the Hindu groups, the police is on record saying it was done without police permission. One. Two, in that group, people were armed. They didn't just arm themselves after the conflagration. In the Muslim groups were armed as well. We've shown you both sides. Both sides were armed, which actually points to a certain level of preparation. Three, there has been some disquiet, the kind of music that has been played by some of the DJs in the processions, Mr. Azad, including Bharat Mein Rehna Ho, to Jai Shri Ram Kehna Hoga, and I'm only sharing with you some of the polite ones. There have been other instances where Ma Behan Galis have been used in these songs. I just want to lay out all the facts here. The second thing is, if you say the police has failed, and I would agree with you that there has been a localized failure, but we cannot discount the fact that there have also been policemen who have taken bullet injuries. I mean, we have to sort of give the entire picture in its full detail. So please respond, and then I'll come to Zafar Saab.
But I already made these 3 points in your discussion some few days back. I said the police failed because the police had not given permission to that procession. There were naked swords over there, and they were doing all this when they were crossing the mosque. And then the attack is a word which has been, of course, loosely used here. But what I'm saying, the mosque people were equally prepared.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying the group suggests that both groups had a space and time.
I agree.
Right now, but the point is there is a larger context, and I'll come back to that in my question to Sandip. Let me bring in Zafar Saab now, who's also been with the Capital's Minorities Commission, now edits the Milli Gazette. How do you respond, Khan Saab?
Sure, I think the letter that these bureaucrats, or rather former bureaucrats, have written is a matter of great courage on their part. Because such people who have held very high offices in government, they normally do not quote controversies and do not want to be on the headlines of newspapers. So it is a great matter of satisfaction that people have spoken what their conscience dictated to them to say. And what they have said, I think it was what they have said is great, but still, from my point of view, it was an understatement, because what is happening here is a very grave. It's actually a turning point in our history, that now we have bulldozer justice. Earlier we had problems, yes, no problem, but now when you see bulldozers coming out or hurtling out from one state to another, and doing justice in no time, without any notice, without judicial process, without any court. So I think it is a matter of great concern for us. And I personally, I speak like a victim. I think that my house is not safe now. Tomorrow they can come, and with the 10 minutes notice, they can demolish my house. I mean, there is no law. Yeah. So this is a very grave issue, and especially for us as Muslims in India, it is a very grave issue, and I think it is sending very wrong messages into the community, and people who are in power and people who are close to power should think about it, that we will have, if this goes on, if we will have a kind of civil war or something like that. And people are already talking about genocides. People are already talking about killing 2 million people, Muslims. They are already talking that it will start from Uttarakhand. So I mean, the signs are ominous. I mean, we can see
Yeah.
that,
Let,
and
let
we
me
cannot.
let, let me
Yes.
let me bring in Sandeep. I want to remind you, Sandeep, that on the day when in Khargon in Madhya Pradesh, you had the state home minister talk about जिसने पत्थर फेंके उनके घर भी अब हम पत्थर को reduce करेंगे. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. Basically, he said those who threw stones, their homes too will be reduced to rubble. And then when that happened, you on Twitter were against it. You were among those who raised questions saying how can bulldozers be an instrument of law against the accused? Please file FIRs, take them to court, let the police investigate, follow the due process of law.
I still
But this
stand.
bulldozer, this bulldozer, एक सवाल, this bulldozer idea of justice is being glorified. And when you said why focus only on BJP states, this defense of the bulldozer is an instrument of justice so far has only come from BJP leaders. I would be with you in focusing on what happened in Rajasthan, in asking the Aam Aadmi Party why they brought in Rohingyas and Bangladeshis at the drop of a hat in Jahangir Puri. But this, and therefore, I'm very happy to talk about how the Congress responded, how the AAP responded. But this idea of bulldozer justice, this has only been defended thus far by BJP office bearers.
See, Barkha, I have not for a moment either supported it then or I support it now. Okay, these are things. My point is twofold. Again, I must clarify before I start that I totally respect Mr. Ribeiro's point that he is entitled to speak in a country which is his, which has been his forefathers, just as any of ours. That is why I say, as citizens, we are all entitled to speak. But when you are adding an official designation to it, then there has to be a greater
What is
responsibility.
the problem with that? What is the
The
problem
problem
with
is
that?
there because you are then going across to state about the Hindu Rashtra. What your today administration is communalized. There are other assumptions being made about a toolkit and master script and a whole variety of insinuations. And what our colleague and the panel just now said, that actually scares me. There have been comments, far more serious comments by leaders of minorities about what they can do to the entire Hindu community if provoked. Or even today or yesterday, there has been a comment in Jharkhand. Those comments are being overlooked, and some stray comments these are things being highlighted or amplified. Some comment of genocide, some comment of what's
But, but,
happening from
but that
Uttarakhand.
Yati Narasinghanand, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. It took 5 days for police action against him in Uttarakhand. You would remember that. Then he repeated his comments with impunity. The editor owner of Sudarshan attended a similar such gathering in Delhi, Sandip, as you know, and you know what he's been saying. He is now bringing his poison to the Indian military, where the defense PRO of our army, no institution represents pluralism in this country better than the Indian military, with its Sardharm Sthals and its Mandir Masjid Gurdwaras and its commanding officers leading their men with the religion of their men. I've spent 2 decades covering the military, and I've always advocated for the military's model of secularism and
I,
pluralism.
that's
And
all of
here you have this man who is a powerful man in the ecosystem today saying that an iftar party is a sign of poison. And you are
no,
saying that nothing has changed, Sandeep, in
no,
our
nothing
public
has changed.
discourse?
I'm not saying public discourses hasn't changed, and that is where we all need to speak up. But do you expect the Prime Minister to speak on this? In that case, don't mind the Prime Minister speak on what's happening in Jharkhand, or when Mr. Owaisi and others make speeches, let him speak. Yesterday, he spoke about petrol hike, and due to which there was uproar. How can he speak to chief ministers about petrol hike, prices not being coming down? If he makes a comment on any of these things, what do you think will happen in the country or entirely in the world if he were to similarly, reprimand other community people? So he has to do, and we have to see the whole thing in a longer run perspective. How has,
Okay.
since day one After BJP has come, everybody has been announcing, okay, it's the end of the day. Even before they came, a lot of people threatened that we are going to leave Hindustan if BJP wins. They again repeated the threat of 2019. Nobody has left because there is no reason to leave. They're all pretty fine out here. So let us not
I mean,
exaggerate things
it's
to
also
such
everybody's
a thing.
country. Every citizen has a right to their country
Of course,
to say what concerns them,
same,
us,
same,
right?
same
But
there.
but you raise an interesting question, and let me put it to Mr. Ribeiro. At which point does it become necessary for the head of government to speak? And I think that's a very important question. And let me bring Mr. Ribeiro in. And again, let me give you the counter argument, Mr. Ribeiro, that will come from BJP supporters, that there have been more religious riots on the Congress watch than there have been on the BJP watch nationally. Of course, the Congress has also spent more decades in government, would be the counter from the Congress. So here's my question. Why do you and other signatories to this letter believe that the Prime Minister, no less, should speak? Because as Mr. Azad says, if the police and the local administration were to do their job, it would not be necessary, perhaps, for anybody else to speak.
You know, Prime Minister does speak on many subjects, and we hear him all the time. In fact, if you keep a watch on the television, it's the Prime Minister hogs the limelight. I mean, it's fair. I have uh, this with that, no quarrel with that. But on a very important subject like this, where hate is being nurtured and where people are fighting in this manner, where things are being done in this manner, where people with naked swords are going around in the streets, passing the mosque, and people from the mosque are throwing stones. I mean, look, if and in so many places, finally in Delhi, at least when it comes to the last part, the Prime Minister should have been worried about it. But if he's not worried, well, he doesn't say anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really am puzzled.
What
If you
would you
ask,
like? What would you like the Prime Minister to be saying at this point, Mr. Ribeiro?
look, here in the country today, if the Prime Minister speaks, people take note of it, and his followers definitely take note of it. If he tells them that this is not on and you stop this, it will stop. I can tell you that. I'm quite certain about it. The Prime Minister is a very powerful man. I mean, a Prime Minister is powerful by itself, but that is, I'm not talking about that. This Prime Minister, like Indira Gandhi, is a very strong Prime Minister. Let us be quite clear about it. And this Prime Minister, I have no doubt, wants the country to go ahead, but so do all of us. But
Yeah.
now, how do you go about it? And he has the best chance to do it.
Yeah.
And I know that how people worship him all over the place. I mean, even people who work for you in your home. I mean, they have great disregard for the Prime Minister. They say he's and they certainly will follow. If he says that I don't like this, you will see how it will stop in one day. There won't be many of these things going on.
I
But
think that's a very important point, and let me put that to Mr. Azad, who's spoken about police failing. There is a sense in Mr. Ribeiro and the letter that they have written that this failure of administration has taken place because there is some kind of covert or overt direction that they're seeing from the political bosses, and therefore, if the Prime Minister were to say, appeal for peace, even nudge his disapproval against these sort of so-called dharam sansas, which are really nothing dharmic about them, then perhaps the police too would be more forceful. For example, I returned to the Shobha Yatra that was taken out without police permission in the capital. Would that have happened if a police officer perceived that his or her bosses and at the very top clearly disapproved of anything that may lead to religious clashes and tension? Mr. Azad?
Barkha, can I
First of
say
all,
half a
let
second?
me
Can
tell
I?
you,
Okay, once again, half a second to Sandip and then Mr. Azad.
Just,
Yes?
not a point of dispute. Mr. Ribeiro has been in service for a long time. Wouldn't we recall situations when there has been volatility, etc., and when the chief minister or his bosses, whosoever in Punjab, had a quiet word with him that, you as the chief of security, please take care of this, and thought it would be more discreet for him not to comment at that point. So the prime minister, we don't know what he has spoken to his intelligence guys or police or home minister. So if he has chosen for political reasons not to speak, I think we must give him the benefit of doubt.
I will come back though to the defense PRO of Jammu having to delete a tweet on iftar. But I will also add that a couple of days later, you had a much more senior officer actually leading the namaz with his men in Jammu and Kashmir. So both things are happening. There's a kind of confusion in the air. That's how I see it. There's a kind of confusion where those who are lily-livered maybe panic and they don't want to say something or they delete their tweets. Those who are more comfortable in what they believe stand by the courage of their convictions. Mr. Azad, sorry, go ahead.
Barkha, this is the longest time I've kept so quiet on your program. So give me some time to speak at least. Okay. See, first of all, my point I want to make very clear. Last time when I was trying to make, there was some problem in between. I have maintained that in 9 states, all the states have failed completely. In Jahanpuri riots, if the police would have refused permission and got those guys, you think the Home Minister would have been angry? No, he would have been very happy. I don't believe that these riots are engineered by some action of the Home Minister. I have been in 5 communal districts, including Bhopal, Sihor, Mandsaur, everywhere, never for a moment or a second. And I had some very noted guys as Home Minister. Noted means inverted commas. Never did I get even one direction from anyone. It's not true that the Home Minister monitors and said, you arrest this man or you do this or in Ram Navami. No, not at all. If the policemen, what do the Home Secretaries do? What do the Chief Secretaries do? If they stand up, they will not be beaten up. They'll be just transferred. Maybe that also may not. That's why it's extremely important today. And I would have hoped that the ex-bureaucrats would have also talked about the breakdown of the law and order machinery across.
So why do you think, Mr. Azad, why do you think, what's your best guess as to why that Shobha Yatra was allowed when there was no police permission for it? It was a group of very aggressive men
because
who had arms, carrying rods in front of a mosque where then stones were thrown, and then we then see the clashes if both groups are armed. So why was that yatra allowed when it had no police permission, according to you?
Because the police did us. Police is always scared of the mahants, and the police is also scared of the mullahs. They don't want to take action. They don't want to get transferred because it's very easy for them. They don't want to face commissions. For them, the best thing is to do put curfew once something happens, arrest people from both sides, put cross cases on the other side, so people think it's a huge task being done. Nobody wants to prevent a riot because it requires guts. It requires guts of steel to be there at the spot and to fire. We were taught that if there is a communal incident starting, you fire and kill both sides too. You save many lives. Look at the kind of property being destroyed. Look at the kind of mayhem being created. It's because the administration doesn't want to function. I wish the ex-bureaucrats. One more point.
But there's one difference. There's one difference that you, instead of 144, you've had bulldozers sent the morning after to bring down the homes of the riot accused, where every single person we interviewed in Jahangirpuri, including Hindus, by the way, I think we have those testimonies, said कि एक भी दंगाई का घर नहीं तोड़ा, सिर्फ गरीब आदमी के पेट में लात पड़ी है, Mr. Azad. So that is one difference कि आप अगली सुबह जाके बुलडोजर भेज रहे हैं. So let's just also remember
that. Point. Who supports the bulldozers? Bulldozers is the most idiotic action ever taken. I mean, I don't agree with the bulldozers at all. Mr. Ghose does not agree with the bulldozer plan. I mean, that's absolutely wrong. There's no question.
Let's get
I wish the bulldozers were used like before, so that the streets would have been clear and police would have been able to manage the procession better and take action. That is when the bulldozers should have been used. Across the states, there There is nothing
Okay,
being done against encroachment, and that is why we have landed up in this position now.
Okay, Zafar Saab, and then Mr. Ribeiro has the last word. We this time flew in this program. Go ahead, Zafar Saab. If the Prime Minister were to speak, what would you want him to say at this point?
You see, it was not an one-off incident. These are, I think, 20 incidents in 9 states. So to say that the Prime Minister is so great that he would not speak about them, it is not acceptable. Prime Ministers in Canada, Prime Ministers in New Zealand, Prime Ministers in many other countries speak on very small things because these concern their societies. And when such things on such large scale happen, the Prime Minister must have spoken. So it was, if he did not speak, it means that somehow he has no problem with what is happening. And I think that his party or his second or third command people are really behind all what is happening. They want this kind of atmosphere to continue before the next general elections. They want it. They want polarization. Polarization is very important for them because they have done nothing actually for this country.
How do you respond to the charge, or rather the comment made by both Mr. Ghosh and Mr. Azad, that there are extreme voices, especially from the sort of Muslim right among political leaders, that are not condemned as unequivocally? How do you respond to that, Zafar Sir?
No, okay. If there are Muslim voices which are illegal, which are anti-national or whatever, just arrest them and put them in jail. No problem. But I think if one Muslim voice says something, there are 1,000 voices on the other side which are saying, and you have seen it. The videos, hundreds of videos are circulating all over the world. Things about genocide, things about killing, thing about murdering, and nothing is happening to them. And they get bail, even if they are arrested after so many days. They get bail within a week or within 10 days, and then they restart their campaign again. So I think there is a method in this madness.
Mr. Ribeiro, the last word to you, sir. This letter is not likely to make the Prime Minister speak. You have obviously been a signatory to it, more in a way to from your own conscience, what you believe. Practically, in real terms, what could happen next that would de-escalate this kind of coarseness that we see in our public discourse and this kind of violence that we have come to see on our streets in clashes?
No, unless the Prime Minister feels that most of his followers do not like it, he is not going to do anything about it. I mean, we are quite practical about it. We know that he is not going to respond. But let me tell you one thing: the tyranny of the majority is certainly much more dangerous than all the problems that the minorities. The minorities, for example, were indulging in a lot of terror activities. And there were some of them on the fringes who were doing it, and they were doing it like all terrorists do it with the tacit approval of their own community. But it can always be controlled by the police. But we can't control the majority. If the majority is wanting to do all, create mayhem in the country, to the detriment of the security climate in the country, to the detriment of the economy, to detriment of everything, moral values, you name it, then what can the police or anyone do about it? I think that they will fight against a wall. So there's no question. It's the majority, when it goes out of hand, it is very more difficult to do anything about it. So,
well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Ribeiro, Mr. Ghosh, Mr. Azad, and Mr. Khan. Here's the point. I think Mr. Ribeiro makes a very important point at the end about public sanction. The envelope on that certainly appears to have pushed what it was once terrible to say. People now say openly on Twitter and in their drawing rooms. What was once impossible to rationalize, like bulldozer justice, you'd be shocked at how many people actually think it's a great way to tackle things. But this debate carries on for another time. Right now, triggered by this letter, 108 signatories asking the Prime Minister to break his silence, calling that silence deafening. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Thank you. Take care. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.